this video, I create new mobs and enemies for Minecraft's Deep Dark biome, starting with a passive mob and working my way up to a new final boss. This gets crazy, so be sure to stick around. The first mob that I want to add to the Deep Dark is a peaceful mob, but not in the way that you might think. Let me explain. In order to stay on track, every video game concept has constraints. Minecraft is no exception. So here's what I have to work with. Firstly, it has to fit Minecraft's art style, because duh. Second, it has to fit the lore of Minecraft. Okay, now I hear you saying, but see, Moonis, Minecraft doesn't have any lore. It actually does. Game Theory made an entire series dedicated to the lore of Minecraft, and while it might just be a theory, a game theory, it's not funny. It's gonna be our source material. And thirdly, it has to add to the experience of the Deep Dark. Now, I could just add a sculk cow and call it a day, but that's boring. Also, I already did it. Look, it moves when it hears noise. It's so cute. In order to fit all of the constraints, I want this first mob to be a neutral animal that prevents you from escaping if the Warden spawns. How, you might ask? I actually haven't gotten to that yet. That means it's time to start brainstorming. After about an hour, I got a couple of pretty decent ideas to use moving forward. I really like this one of a Venus flytrap-like plant that snatches you if you step on it, but after struggling with it for a couple more hours, I just couldn't see this idea working in Minecraft's art style, and I was forced to come up with something else. So it's time for some audience participation. Which mob did I eventually settle with? Is it A, tentacle worm, B, sticky sculk, or C, an interconnected series of roots and plants that can move depending on where the player is and grabs their foot when it's stepped on? That's a trick question, it's none of them. The correct answer is this little guy. This is a sculk mole. He's cute, blind, and very fast. So fast, in fact, that he can move through sculk at a top speed of 12 blocks per second. And for comparison, the player runs at a top speed of 5.6 blocks per second. This guy's double the player speed. But how does it stop you? Well, because this creature is so fast, it can get in front of you while you're running. And if you're unlucky enough to step on it, well, it grabs around your leg and it doesn't let go. The only way to get out of its grip is by hitting the sculk sensor on the top of its head. It's not a crazy difficult mob to deal with, but it just might slow you down long enough for something else to take you instead. Oh, it's also able to burrow into the sculk, and it is the cutest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, look at this little guy. I love how it turned out, but it's far from over because we still have another mob and a boss to design. And trust me, they just get better from here. The second mob that I want to add is an illager type mob. Now, according to game theory, the ancient city where the sculk lives was once inhabited by ancient builders. The sculk itself is a sentient invasive species, kinda like a fungus. Well, fungi have been known to take over certain animals' bodies and even control their minds. You see where I'm going with this? This illager is going to be completely overtaken by sculk. I'm gonna call it a sculkager. Starting this concept, I wasn't too sure what its outfit would look like, nor did I know what it would actually do. Oh yeah, this guy's gonna have a special power. More about that in a second. For the outfit, I wanted to make it look like an evoker, but with, you know, sculk and stuff. But then again, I recently watched Hell of a Boss, and in it, one of the main characters, Stullis, was wearing this. If that doesn't look like an illager outfit, I don't know what does. I didn't know which outfit to draw, so I did the only logical thing anybody would do in this scenario. I drew both of them. I couldn't get the loose cloth quite right, so I just kind of made it a texture instead. And after drawing this, I was reminded of an early concept of the Warden, where it is literally being overtaken by an early version of sculk. So great minds think alike, I guess. Or I stole the idea entirely, but we're gonna ignore that. For its special ability, I wanted it to be able to easily spread the sculk block to any type of block, not just stone. Also, if you're standing close to him when he does this, you'll receive a new potion effect called Overturned, meaning you are literally being overtaken by sculk, and your health, hunger, and saturation are cut in half. Remember, you're eating for 2 now. This also affects every non-sculk mob in the game, making creeper explosions weaker, skeleton shoot shorter, and so on and so on. It's basically just a massive debuff. Now, you might be thinking, why is an illager all the way down in the Deep Dark to begin with? Well, do you remember the ancient builders that I mentioned earlier? This guy was one of them. In fact, he was a sculk researcher, and he even had his own lab directly below the portal in the center of the ancient city. Since Mojang hasn't done anything with this room, I will. You snooze, you lose. Because he was an ancient builder, he would only be able to spawn in the ancient city. Anywhere outside of that in the Deep Dark wouldn't count. Now, the Evoker is a special illager mob that drops an incredibly powerful item when it dies, the Totem of Undying. So what's this guy gonna drop? Well, Sculk Catalyst, take it or leave it. This is the Deep Dark, you get no help here. This guy is dangerous, don't get me wrong, but he's nothing compared to the final boss that he protects. And to set the mood for this new beast of a mob, we have to go into its natural habitat. The Deep Dark dimension is shrouded in complete darkness, and I wanted this boss to reflect that. This new Sculk boss is going to be the new final boss of the game, completely overtaking the Ender Dragon in size and power. So I had to come up with some ideas that meet that criteria. In one of Minecraft's old mob votes, Mojang proposed a Blaze boss that would be more powerful than the Blaze and do much more damage. So I'm gonna steal that idea. My idea was to take the Sculk Mole from earlier and to beef it up as much as possible. But I couldn't just upscale the Sculk Mole though. That would be really boring. So what would it really look like? And more more importantly, what would it do? I did a bit of experimenting and rendering, and after about 2 hours, I had come up with several iterations. You see, when a concept artist is tasked with designing anything, they make a lot of iterations to see what works and what doesn't. And yeah, this wasn't working. So I spent another hour coming up with more ideas, and I eventually came up with this. This isn't the final product though. It ends up looking way cooler, trust me. But to make it look cooler, I had to design it in 3D and then render it out. Since I don't have a 3D software, I used Clip Studio Paint's 3D model function to move around these little grid blocks until I was satisfied with the shape. And after completing the line art and adding on color, I was ultimately left with the result that I was satisfied with. But before I show you what it looks like, I want to talk about how a creature like this is actually designed. Before a final product is made, like this, or this, yeah, even that. It first starts off as an idea that needs to be fleshed out. That's where concept artists come in. They take the idea and they design it. What they end up drawing sets the direction for the entire project. For example, if Mojang decided to use this version of the sculk block, then everything after that, including the Warden, would look something like this. And to be honest, I'm glad we got the design we did, because this thing is much scarier. Because of that, they make tens of hundreds of designs before settling on something that they can actually use. And when they eventually settle on a design, they also usually draw the design several different times and in several different poses so that the animators can bring it to life later down the line. Now back to the sculk boss. I think this mob looks terrifying, but what's even scarier than this is what it can do. First things first is that instead of grabbing you by the leg like the sculk mole, this guy flings you into the air, and the only way to survive that is with a water bucket. Except good luck doing that, because you are blind the entire time you fight it. The second thing that makes this boss so scary is its scale. This is the player, and that is the sculk boss. It's kind of like if you take a goldfish out of a fish tank and put it in a lake, except the goldfish probably won't kill you. Probably. One thing I mentioned earlier is that the sculk boss is blind. You'll also notice that he actually has no eyes. This is because of a little something I like to call biology. When animals grow up and reproduce in an environment without light, it has to survive by using its other senses. So the sculk boss is kitted out with a sound-sensing tail, as well as ears in the shape of horns. So even though the sculk boss can't see you, it definitely knows where you are. Of course, it wouldn't be actual concept art if I didn't add action shots. I wanted to capture this guy flinging the player into the air. Now, when it does this, I want it to actually jump out of the ground, kind of like how a whale jumps out of the water. To get it to look right, I may or may not have referenced those really annoying flippy things in Super Mario 64, but either which way it looks pretty good. Again, if this was an actual project, there would most likely be way more of these action shots in different poses. There's also a thing called turnarounds that are made to help the 3D modeler stay on model when they actually make it, and now that I think about it, I probably should have done that for the designs that I made, but since it's not an actual project, I only made 1/3 view and one action shot. But we're not done yet, because I actually already added one of these mobs into the game. So once again, it's time for some audience participation. Which mob did I add to the game? Is it the sculk mole, the skulkager, or the sculk boss? Whichever one you were thinking of, it was wrong. It was the sculk cow. It was always the sculk cow. I think you should check out this video next. I worked really hard on it and I'm super proud of it. Anyways, stay icy, my friends. Bye.